In every relationship, there are invisible lines that should never be crossed, boundaries that protect the dignity and worth of the person we claim to love, and standards of respect that form the foundation of genuine partnership. But sometimes we become so comfortable in our relationships, so used to patterns of behavior that have developed over years, that we stop seeing how our words and actions affect the person we share our life with. This is the story of how one man's pattern of disrespect reached a breaking point on national television, how Steve Harvey drew a line in the sand that shocked everyone watching, and how that moment became the catalyst for the most important transformation of a marriage that was slowly dying from 1,000 small cuts of contempt. Before we dive into this powerful story about respect, consequences, and the courage it takes to change ingrained behavior, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Because what you're about to witness is a masterclass in setting boundaries and understanding that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior. The Patterson family from Detroit, Michigan walked onto the Family Feud stage in November 2024 with the kind of dynamic that immediately caught Steve Harvey's attention, though not for the right reasons. 41-year-old Michael Patterson stood at the front, a tall man with a loud voice and an even louder personality, the kind of person who seemed to take up more space than necessary in any room. Beside him stood his wife of 16 years, 38-year-old Angela Patterson, a woman whose smile seemed practiced and whose eyes held a weariness that went beyond simple nervousness about being on a game show. Joining them were Michael's two brothers, Kevin and Dante, and Angela's younger sister Shauna, who kept a protective arm around Angela throughout the introductions. From the very first moments of meeting the family during the pre-show warm-up, the production staff had noticed something uncomfortable in the family dynamic. Michael had a habit of making jokes at Angela's expense, dismissive little comments about her being slow or not understanding things, observations about her appearance that were framed as humor but carried an edge of criticism. When Angela would respond to his comments, he would laugh and tell her she was too sensitive, that she could not take a joke, that everyone knew he was just kidding around. The other family members seemed used to this pattern, laughing along uncomfortably or changing the subject, clearly accustomed to Michael's behavior and unsure how to address it. During the practice round before taping, Michael had interrupted Angela multiple times when she was trying to answer questions, had made a comment about her gaining weight that made everyone on stage visibly uncomfortable, and had rolled his eyes dramatically when she gave an answer he thought was wrong. One of the producers had quietly pulled Michael aside and reminded him that Family Feud was a family show, that respect for all contestants was important, and that he needed to be mindful of how he was treating his wife on camera. Michael had laughed it off, assured them he would behave, and promised that he and Angela were just kidding around, that this was their dynamic and she did not mind. But when the producer asked Angela privately if she was comfortable with how Michael was speaking to her, the tears that immediately filled her eyes told a different story. She quickly wiped them away and insisted everything was fine, that this was just how Michael was, that she was used to it, and it did not really bother her anymore. The producer was not convinced but did not push further, instead making a note to keep a close eye on the situation during taping. When the game officially started, Steve Harvey went through his usual charming introductions, asking each family member about themselves and creating the warm, fun atmosphere that Family Feud was known for. When he got to Michael and Angela, he asked them the standard question about how long they had been married and what their secret was to a lasting relationship. Michael immediately jumped in before Angela could speak, saying with a laugh that the secret was that he made all the decisions and Angela just went along with whatever he said. The audience gave an uncertain laugh, not sure if this was meant to be funny or if it was uncomfortable. Steve's eyebrows went up slightly, his expression showing that he had registered the comment but was giving Michael the benefit of the doubt for now. He turned to Angela and asked if that was really how their marriage worked. Angela, her smile not quite reaching her eyes, said that Michael liked to be in charge and she had learned to pick her battles. There was something in the way she said it, a resignation that went beyond normal compromising in a relationship, that made Steve look at her more closely. But he moved on, starting the game and hoping that the competitive energy would shift the dynamic into something more positive. The first round went relatively smoothly, with both families giving good answers and the energy staying light. But in the second round, when Angela was at the podium answering a question, Michael started making comments from his position with the rest of the family. When she gave an answer that was on the board but not the number one response, he loudly said, "That is what I told her to say in the car, but she never listens to me." When she hesitated on another question, trying to think through her answer, he called out, "Come on, Angela, we do not have all day, just say something." And when she gave an answer that was not on the board, he threw his hands up in exasperation and said, "See, this is exactly why I should be the one answering all the questions." Steve Harvey stopped the game. The studio fell silent as Steve walked over to where Michael was standing, his expression serious in a way that anyone who had watched the show knew meant he was not playing around anymore. "Michael," Steve said, his voice quiet but firm, "I need you to stop commenting on your wife's answers. She is doing just fine, and your job right now is to support her, not criticize her." Michael laughed, clearly not taking Steve seriously. "Come on, Steve," he said, "I'm just keeping it real. You know how it is, wives need a little guidance sometimes, or they get all up in their feelings." The audience went completely silent, the uncomfortable tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. Steve's expression shifted from firm to genuinely angry, a look that the Family Feud crew had rarely seen in all the years he had been hosting. "That is strike one," Steve said, his voice cold. "You get two more and you are done. I do not care if we have to stop this entire taping. I will not have you disrespecting your wife on my stage. Now I am going to ask you one more time to be respectful and supportive, or you can leave right now. Your choice." Michael, clearly not used to being challenged, especially by another man and especially in front of an audience, tried to laugh it off again. "Man, you are being too sensitive," he said. "Angela knows I am just joking around. We do this all the time. Do not we, baby?" He turned to Angela, expecting her to back him up, to tell Steve that everything was fine, to play her usual role of smoothing things over and minimizing his behavior. But something had shifted in Angela in that moment. Maybe it was the fact that someone, especially someone with Steve Harvey's authority and presence, had actually stood up for her. Maybe it was the weight of 16 years of small disrespects finally becoming too heavy to carry. Maybe it was simply that being on national television made her see her marriage through someone else's eyes for the first time. Whatever the reason, instead of agreeing with Michael, instead of playing along, Angela spoke a truth that she had been holding inside for years. "No, Michael," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "we do not do this all the time. You do this all the time. You make comments about my weight, about my intelligence, about my decisions, about everything I do, and you call it joking. But it is not joking when it makes me feel small and worthless. It is not joking when I cry myself to sleep because I feel like I can never do anything right in your eyes. It is not joking when our daughters are starting to think that this is how men are supposed to treat women because this is what they see their father doing to their mother." The studio erupted in applause, the audience standing to support Angela's moment of truth-telling. Michael's face went red, clearly embarrassed and angry at being called out in front of millions of people. "You are really going to do this here?" he said to Angela, his voice rising. "You are going to make me look bad on national television." Before Angela could respond, Steve stepped between them, his presence commanding and his voice brooking no argument. "Brother, you made yourself look bad the moment you started disrespecting your wife," he said. "She did not do that to you, you did that to yourself. And right now you have a choice to make. You can humble yourself, you can listen to what your wife is telling you, you can take accountability for how you have been treating her, or you can keep defending your behavior. But I am telling you right now, if you choose the second option, this conversation is over and you are leaving this stage." Michael, his ego clearly bruised and his anger rising, made the worst possible choice. "This is ridiculous," he said. "I came here to play a game and have fun, not to be attacked by my wife and lectured by you about my marriage. Angela is overreacting like she always does, making a big deal out of nothing, and if she has a problem with how I treat her, maybe she should have said something before we came on national television." Steve did not hesitate. "That is it," he said, his voice final. "You are done. I need you to leave the stage right now." The audience gasped, some people applauding, others looking shocked that Steve was actually following through on his threat. Michael stood there, clearly not believing that Steve was serious, clearly expecting that this was all for show and that they would move on with the game. But Steve was not backing down. "I am not asking you, I am telling you," Steve said. "You can walk off on your own, or I can have security escort you off, but either way, you are leaving this stage right now. You have disrespected your wife for the last time on my show." Michael, realizing that Steve was completely serious, looked around at his family members, perhaps expecting them to defend him, to tell Steve he was overreacting. But his brothers were silent, looking uncomfortable but not intervening. Shauna had her arm around Angela, who was crying quietly, and the audience was clearly on Steve's side, their expressions showing support for the decision. "Fine," Michael said, his voice dripping with anger and wounded pride. I will leave. But this is crazy, all of this over some jokes. You people are all too sensitive. He started to walk off the stage, but Steve stopped him with one more statement. Michael, before you go, I need you to understand something. The way you have been treating your wife is not joking. It is abuse. It might not be physical abuse, but emotional abuse is just as damaging, just as destructive, and just as unacceptable. The words you use, the contempt you show, the constant criticism and belittling, that destroys a person's spirit just as surely as any physical violence. And your wife deserves better than that. Your daughters deserve to see their mother treated with respect so they know what to expect from their future partners. And honestly, you deserve better than to be the kind of man who tears down the woman he promised to build a life with. Michael stood frozen for a moment, Steve's words hanging in the air between them. For just a second, something flickered across his face, maybe recognition, maybe shame, maybe the first crack in his defensive armor. But then his pride won out, and he walked off the stage without another word, disappearing into the wings while the studio remained in stunned silence. Steve turned back to the remaining family members, his expression softening as he looked at Angela, who was visibly shaking, tears streaming down her face. He walked over to her and spoke gently. Angela, I know that was hard, and I know what just happened probably feels overwhelming right now. But I need you to know that you did nothing wrong. Speaking your truth, setting a boundary, refusing to accept unacceptable behavior, that is not overreacting. That is self-respect, and that is courage. The audience applauded again, and Shauna hugged her sister tightly. Steve continued, addressing not just Angela but everyone watching. Ladies and gentlemen, what we just witnessed was not entertainment. This was a real moment of a woman finding her voice, and a man being held accountable for behavior that should never be acceptable in any relationship. I'm going to use this moment to talk about something really important, because I know there are people watching right now who see themselves in Angela's situation, who have partners who treat them with contempt and call it humor, who make them feel small and worthless, and then say they are too sensitive when they object. He paused, making sure everyone was listening. Respect is not optional in a relationship. It is not something you can skip over because you have been together for a long time or because that is just your personality or because you did not really mean it. When you make a commitment to someone, when you promise to love them and honor them, that means treating them with dignity, speaking to them with kindness, and building them up instead of tearing them down. Steve asked Angela if she wanted to continue with the game or if she needed to take a break, giving her full control over what happened next. Angela wiped her tears and made a decision that showed incredible strength. I want to keep playing, she said. I want to show my daughters that you do not have to accept disrespect, that you can set boundaries and still keep moving forward, that you are not defined by how someone else treats you, but by how you respond to it. The game continued with Angela and her remaining family members, and something remarkable happened. Without Michael's constant criticism and interruption, Angela blossomed. She gave confident answers, she laughed genuinely, she high-fived her sister and Michael's brothers when they got answers right, and she seemed to stand taller with each passing minute. The transformation was so visible that Steve commented on it during a break in the action. Angela, he said, I have to tell you, the difference in your energy and confidence since Michael left is like night and day. Do you feel it? She nodded, fresh tears forming, but these ones different than before. I did not realize how much energy I was using just trying to manage his reactions, trying to anticipate what would set him off, trying to make myself smaller so he would not have something to criticize. Without that weight, I feel like I can breathe for the first time in years. The Patterson family ended up winning the game, and Angela was the one who played fast money, scoring enough points to win the $20,000 for her family. When the confetti fell and Steve hugged her in celebration, she broke down crying again, but this time they were tears of relief and joy and the overwhelming realization that maybe things could actually be different. After the taping ended, Steve asked Angela and Shauna to stay behind for a private conversation. The cameras were off now, and he spoke to them with the wisdom of someone who had lived long enough to understand the complexity of relationships and change. Angela, I want you to know that what happened today does not have to be the end of your marriage if you do not want it to be, Steve said. But it does have to be the end of accepting the way Michael has been treating you. If he is willing to do real work, to go to counseling, to examine why he feels the need to put you down, to change his behavior and not just apologize for it, then maybe there is a path forward. But that work has to come from him, not from you trying to fix him or make excuses for him or minimizing what he has done. He looked at her seriously. But I also want you to know that if he is not willing to do that work, if he comes back defensive and angry and blaming you for what happened, if he tries to manipulate you into taking him back without any real change, then you need to be prepared to make some hard decisions about what is best for you and your daughters. Shauna spoke up, her protective instincts clear. She's not going back to that house until we know it is safe, emotionally safe, I mean. She is staying with me, and we are going to figure out next steps together. Steve nodded approvingly and then shared something personal. I have not always been the best husband, he admitted. I have had to do my own work to understand how my words and actions affect my wife, to learn that just because something is a joke to me does not mean it is not hurtful to her, to recognize that love is shown through respect and consideration, not through dominance and control. Change is possible, but only if someone really wants to change and is willing to do the hard internal work it requires. He gave Angela his personal contact information for a counselor who specialized in relationships and emotional abuse, made sure she had resources and support, and told her that the show would check in on her in the coming months. Then he did something unexpected. He asked if Angela would be willing, when she was ready, to come back on the show and talk about her journey, not to embarrass Michael or to air their private business, but to help other women who might see themselves in her story and need to know that they are not alone, and that change is possible. In the weeks following the taping and before the episode aired, Michael and Angela's story took several important turns. Michael, after cooling down from his initial anger and embarrassment, had to face the reality of what had happened. His brothers, who had witnessed everything, sat him down for a hard conversation where they told him that Steve Harvey had been right, that the way he treated Angela was not okay, that they had been uncomfortable with it for years but had not known how to address it. His mother, when she heard what had happened, was devastated and ashamed, telling him that she had not raised him to treat women that way and that he needed to get help. The isolation and consequences of his behavior forced Michael to do something he had never really done before: look honestly at himself and his patterns. He started individual therapy, working with a counselor who specialized in helping men understand and change controlling and disrespectful behavior in relationships. The work was hard and uncomfortable, forcing him to examine where he had learned these patterns, why he felt the need to put Angela down to feel powerful, and how his behavior was damaging his marriage and affecting his daughters. Meanwhile, Angela, living with her sister and having space from the constant criticism and tension, began her own therapy journey. She worked on understanding why she had accepted Michael's treatment for so long, how to rebuild her sense of self-worth, and what healthy boundaries looked like in a relationship. She spent quality time with her daughters, having honest, age-appropriate conversations about respect and relationships, determined that they would not internalize the dynamics they had witnessed. 3 months after the incident, the episode finally aired, and the response was overwhelming. The show's social media exploded with comments from people sharing their own stories of emotional abuse and disrespect in relationships, thanking Angela for her courage and thanking Steve for taking a stand. Mental health professionals praised the way Steve had handled the situation, naming emotional abuse clearly and setting firm boundaries. Relationship educators used the clip as a teaching tool for what contempt and criticism do to relationships and why respect is non-negotiable. But perhaps the most meaningful responses came from men who saw themselves in Michael's behavior and reached out to say that watching the episode had been a wake-up call, that they had not realized how their jokes and comments were affecting their partners, and that they were seeking help to change. Several women wrote to Angela directly through the show, saying that watching her stand up for herself had given them the courage to do the same in their own relationships. The cultural conversation that emerged from this one Family Feud episode was significant. People started talking about the difference between playful teasing and contemptuous criticism, about how emotional abuse is often minimized or dismissed, about the impact on children who witness disrespectful dynamics between their parents, and about what real accountability and change look like versus performative apologies. 6 months after the original episode, Steve Harvey invited Angela back on the show for a special update segment. She came alone, looking healthy and strong, wearing a bright blue dress and a genuine smile that lit up her whole face. Steve welcomed her warmly and asked her to share what the past 6 months had been like. "It has been the hardest and best 6 months of my life," Angela said. "After the show, I moved in with my sister and started therapy. I had to learn how to trust my own judgment again, how to recognize what I needed and deserved in a relationship, and how to set boundaries and stick to them. And I had to figure out what I wanted for my future, whether that included Michael or not." She explained that Michael had also been in therapy, working intensively on his issues. He had written her a letter, not asking her to take him back but taking full accountability for his behavior, acknowledging the pain he had caused, and sharing what he was learning about himself and why he had treated her the way he did. They had started couples counseling 3 months ago, meeting weekly with a therapist who specialized in helping couples recover from emotional abuse and rebuild their relationship on a foundation of mutual respect. "It has not been easy," Angela said. "There have been sessions where we both cried for hours, where Michael had to face the reality of how his words affected me and our daughters, where I had to express anger and hurt that I had been suppressing for years. But there has also been real change, not just promises but actual behavioral change that I can see and feel." She shared specific examples of how things were different now. Michael had learned to pause before speaking, to consider whether his words were building up or tearing down, to ask for her input instead of making all the decisions, to apologize genuinely when he slipped into old patterns, and to celebrate her successes instead of diminishing them. He had also started therapy with their daughters, working to repair the damage his behavior had caused and to model what accountability and change looked like. Steve asked the question everyone wanted to know. "Are you back together?" Angela smiled. "We are taking it slow," she said. "We are dating again, learning how to be partners instead of falling back into old dysfunctional patterns. We have rules like Michael has to live separately until our therapist agrees that the changes are stable and lasting. We have weekly check-ins where we talk about how things are going, and we have agreed that if he slips back into disrespectful behavior, I will leave immediately and permanently. I love him, but I love myself and my daughters more, and I will not sacrifice our well-being for a relationship that is not healthy." Steve turned to the camera with an important message. What Angela and Michael are doing is not easy, and it is not for everyone. There are situations where leaving is the only safe and healthy option, especially when there is physical violence or when someone refuses to acknowledge their behavior or do the work to change. But for couples where both people are willing to do deep, genuine work, where the person who has caused harm is willing to take full accountability and make lasting changes, healing is possible. He shared practical wisdom for viewers. If you are in a relationship where you are being disrespected, criticized constantly, made to feel small or worthless, that is not love and it is not okay. Love builds you up, makes you feel valued and cherished, treats you with kindness and respect even during disagreements. If your partner calls their disrespect humor or tells you that you are too sensitive, that is gaslighting, and it is a form of emotional abuse. You deserve better, and you have the right to set boundaries and demand respect. Steve also addressed people who might see themselves in Michael's behavior. If you recognize yourself in Michael's pattern of putting your partner down, interrupting them, criticizing them, making decisions without their input, or dismissing their feelings, you need to understand that this behavior is destroying your relationship and hurting the person you claim to love. Getting help is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength and real love. A good therapist can help you understand where these patterns come from and teach you healthier ways of relating. He emphasized that change is not about perfection, but about consistent effort and genuine accountability. Michael still has moments where he starts to fall into old patterns, Steve said, but the difference is that now he catches himself, he apologizes genuinely, and he makes a different choice. That is what real change looks like, not never making mistakes, but taking responsibility when you do and doing better next time. Angela shared one final powerful message. "To any woman watching who sees herself in my story, I want you to know that you are not crazy, you are not too sensitive, and you are not overreacting. If your partner's words make you feel small, if you are constantly walking on eggshells trying not to trigger their criticism, if you have lost yourself trying to be whatever they need you to be, that is not your fault, and you do not have to accept it. There is life beyond accepting disrespect. There is joy in being treated with kindness, and there is power in knowing your worth and refusing to settle for less than you deserve." The segment concluded with Steve announcing that he had partnered with several organizations to create resources for people experiencing emotional abuse in relationships, including hotlines, counseling referrals, and educational materials about healthy versus unhealthy relationship dynamics. He emphasized that emotional abuse is just as serious as physical abuse and deserves the same level of attention and resources. The response to Angela's update was even more overwhelming than the response to the original episode. Therapists reported increased requests for help with emotional abuse issues. Domestic violence organizations saw a surge in calls from people experiencing non-physical abuse who had not previously identified their situation as abusive. and countless individuals shared stories of how Angela's courage had inspired them to make changes in their own lives and relationships. 1 year after the original incident, Angela and Michael came back on the show together for a final update. The difference in their dynamic was remarkable. They sat close together, but not in a possessive way. They made eye contact when speaking to each other, and there was genuine warmth and respect visible in their interactions. Michael spoke first, his voice humble and sincere. "A year ago, I was kicked off this stage for disrespecting my wife, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to look at myself honestly for the first time, to see how my behavior was destroying my marriage and damaging my daughters. The work I have done this year has been the hardest thing I have ever done, facing the ugly parts of myself, understanding where I learned to treat women with contempt, learning new ways of communicating and relating. But it has also been the most important work of my life." He turned to Angela, his eyes glistening with tears. "I am grateful that Angela gave me the chance to change, but I also understand that she did not owe me that chance. She could have walked away, and it would have been completely justified. The fact that she was willing to do the work with me while also protecting herself and our daughters, that shows a strength and wisdom that I am still learning from." Angela shared her perspective. "A year ago, I thought that accepting disrespect was just part of being married, that this was normal, that maybe I was too sensitive, like Michael always said. Being on this show, having Steve draw a line and say that this behavior was not acceptable, that was the first time someone had validated what I was feeling. It gave me permission to trust myself, to believe that I deserved better, and to demand the respect that should be basic in any relationship." She explained that they had moved back in together 6 months ago, but with clear agreements and boundaries in place. "We have weekly therapy sessions that are non-negotiable. We have rules about communication and respect that we both committed to, and we have contingency plans in place if Michael slips back into old patterns. Most importantly, I know now that I am strong enough to leave if I need to, and that knowledge actually makes me more free to choose to stay because I am not staying out of fear or dependency, but out of genuine choice." Their daughters, now teenagers, had also been part of the healing process. Michael had done individual therapy with each of them, listening to how his behavior had affected them, apologizing for the example he had set, and working to build a new kind of relationship based on respect and open communication. The girls had also been part of family therapy sessions where they learned about healthy relationships and had the space to express their feelings and needs. Steve asked them what advice they would give to other couples struggling with similar issues. Michael spoke thoughtfully. "If you are the person causing harm, stop defending yourself and start listening. Stop making excuses and start taking responsibility. Stop expecting your partner to get over it and start doing the hard work of actual change. Get therapy, read books about healthy relationships, talk to other men who have done this work, and understand that change takes time and consistent effort, not just one apology and expecting everything to be fine." Angela added her wisdom. "If you are the person being disrespected, know that you deserve better and that accepting bad behavior does not make you a good partner, it just enables the bad behavior to continue. Set boundaries, stick to them, and do not compromise your dignity or self-worth for any relationship. And know that whether your partner changes or not, you can build a life where you are treated with the respect and kindness you deserve." Steve concluded the segment with a powerful final message. The Patterson family's story shows us that change is possible, but it is not guaranteed. It requires genuine accountability from the person who has caused harm, clear boundaries from the person who has been hurt, professional help to navigate the complex process of healing, and a commitment from both people to do things differently. But most importantly, it shows us that we should never accept being treated with contempt or disrespect, no matter how long we have been in a relationship or how much we love someone. Before we end this incredible journey, I need you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because stories like this remind us that sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, that boundaries are expressions of self-respect, and that real change requires more than words. It requires consistent action and genuine transformation. The Patterson family story became a touchstone in conversations about emotional abuse, healthy relationships, and what accountability and change really look like. Michael became an advocate for other men struggling with disrespectful behavior patterns, speaking at men's groups and church events about his journey, and encouraging other men to get help before they lose their families. Angela started a support group for women dealing with emotional abuse in relationships, creating a safe space where women could share their experiences, learn about healthy boundaries, and support each other through difficult decisions. Their daughters grew up with a powerful example of how relationships can heal when both people are willing to do the work, but also with the understanding that they should never accept disrespect from a partner and that they have the strength to demand better. Steve Harvey continued to use his platform to talk about respect in relationships, the difference between playful humor and contemptuous criticism, and the importance of treating our partners with the same kindness and consideration we showed when we were trying to win their hearts. The episode remains one of the most shared and discussed Family Feud moments, not because of dramatic entertainment, but because of the real-life lessons it taught about dignity, respect, and the courage it takes to change. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about what you learned or how it relates to your own experiences. And remember that you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness in all your relationships, and that settling for less is not being a good partner, it is abandoning yourself. There is strength in setting boundaries, wisdom in demanding respect, and freedom in knowing that you are worthy of love that builds you up instead of tearing you down.